April 12th, 2026. We have just had peace talks for the war in Iran in Islamabad. Okay? Why did they choose Islamabad? Because when they were listing cities, someone said Islamabad, and JD Vance said, hell yeah, it is. JD Vance, by the way, our lead negotiator. Our lead negotiator. He's only the most unpopular vice president at this point in the presidency ever. Which is weird because he's doing the same thing Dick Cheney did, invade the Middle East. But Dick Cheney had plus 37, he's minus 18. What happened? What happened to this country? Our least popular vice president ever at this point in his term is our lead negotiator in Islamabad to talk with Iran. And they had 21 hours of peace talks in a row. It was a marathon session. They just kept trying to hammer out details of the peace agreement. And at the end of the 21-hour peace talks, JD Vance came out with good news and with bad news.
We have been at it now for 21 hours, and we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America.
Good news is that we talked for 21 hours. The bad news is we got no agreement. So there's really only bad news. So we're really exactly where we started. Okay. Interesting. Donald Trump, who was not at the negotiations but was briefed on them, had to jump in. So during this 21 hours of negotiations, while they're feeding information back to Trump, he surreptitiously retweets this on Truth Social, which is a post from Just the News that says, the Trump card the president holds if Iran won't bend, a naval blockade. Just an idea from some insane right-wing slop website. 12 hours later, that's the plan. I don't know if he was prepping for the idea with the public or if he got the idea from this, but he retweets this, and then 12 hours later, we're coming out and going, okay, effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. I have instructed our Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas. We're going Pirates of the Caribbean on this bitch. Other countries will be involved in this blockade. Other countries not named. My girlfriend goes to a different school. Other countries not named will be part of this blockade. Iran will not be allowed to profit off this illegal act of extortion. Additionally, and at an appropriate moment, we are fully, quote, locked and loaded, and our military will finish up the little that is left of Iran. So the ceasefire thing is just gone. Apparently it's going to last till the end of the 2 weeks, which is on April 22nd. So we have about 10 days left from when I'm recording this. But at the end of that, there's no plan to continue it seems, at this point. And negotiations are not going well. So, by the way, but before I move on, this is a pretty important tweet. The President of the United States, who has been trying desperately to end the blockade of Hormuz, is now responding by doubling the blockade of Hormuz. We are now having a double blockade. So it's a pretty big escalation. I mean, I'll go through what this means, but it's a big deal. And then 30 minutes after posting this incredibly important update on a major geopolitical situation, he posted what happened to Bruce Springsteen and talked about his plastic surgery. This is, again, 23 minutes after that. So I'm glad the seriousness of the situation is being felt. Look, let's talk about it. Let's draw up what's actually happening. So after the attacks on Iran blockaded Hormuz, this 21-mile narrow gap where a massive amount of global shipping goes through. 20% of the world's oil, ton of the world's precursors to fertilizer, natural gas, ton of everything goes through this strait. Iran blockaded it and created this toll booth right here where you could pay them yuan to get your ship to go through. Now, not many ships did this, but a few did. Chinese vessels, few did go through this toll booth. Okay? Donald Trump, in his Don Zoo mode, said break an enemy blockade by blockading their blockade. And now is setting up a second blockade back here so that if you pay the toll and go through, you are going to run into American ships and not be allowed to go through. Thus, the plan being, by the way, there is some strategic merit to this. It's more the optics are horrible, but the strategic merit is that Iran can no longer fund itself by sending its own ships and a few of its ally ships. Now, if the Gulf states can't get through, nobody can get through, is the idea that the United States is saying. And what's interesting is this may be something the United States could pull off without a hitch, if not for one major question. This plan, there is some merit to it, but there's one major question that makes it a huge, dangerous, scary escalation. Now, I went on Chinese social media and I saw that the drawing I made here is being made there. This is on Chinese social media. They're making the same drawing and they're coming to similar questions. And the major question of this situation is, what happens when a Chinese ship tries to exit the strait? If a Chinese ship goes to this toll booth, sails out here with oil headed for China, is the United States going to stop it? Is it going to blow it up? That is a major question. That is a World War III type question. Is it a taco? Is it an escalation? What happens? And especially if China chooses to send military ships to come and escort their boats through a blockade that the President of the United States has publicly endorsed. That is a real Suez crisis moment where either the United States backs down to China and then a massive geopolitical shift is underway, or they don't, and then the escalation could cause World War III. I mean, it's a serious, I'm joking somewhat, but this is serious, okay? So what does China do? Well, there's one plan I could give them. Third blockade. A third blockade? Put a third one behind? Let's go crazy with this. Wait a minute. That could be based. No, but being seriously, because this might be World War III, I don't want this to be my last clip on the subject. Being seriously, the danger here is now becoming the US and China getting into serious at-odds military conflict. That is now the serious danger of this blockade. Because, first of all, tensions are already rising because China has, this is leaked, but apparently providing Iran with weapons with which to shoot down American planes. And so that is already causing problems. Trump said, if this is real, I threaten 50% tariff, which, by the way, seems minor compared to what that would actually be. But that's the beginning. I mean, these are all like pre-World War I type headlines. These are all escalations that are like, how do they get an off-ramp here? So China's providing weapons to Iran. And also, on the flip side, all that talk that you might have heard about how China doesn't really need the Strait of Hormuz, I think was largely overblown. Yes, China has a good strategic petroleum reserve, but we need to not understate that 37% of all traffic through this thing goes directly to China. They're the largest importer of oil from it. It is extremely important for them economically. They can't just ignore it. They can't just be like, it don't matter, when they were getting it through this toll booth. Again, article from today in the FT, Fortress China shows cracks as Iran war strains supply chains. Energy, chemicals, and helium all under pressure despite Beijing's push to build up economic security. The truth is, this matters, which means the United States blockading it is a direct economic attack on China, which could lead to a military attack. I mean, it reminds me of like when the US blockaded Japan's oil during World War II, which is a direct precursor to Pearl Harbor. Like, these economic cutoffs are always the precursor to what happens in real war. Like, this is like an escalation that requires either a taco or next level. Okay, so again, Xi Jinping in this situation has two options. Number one is use strategic petroleum reserves, which they have plenty, and try to wait it out. And number two is send ships in and escort their vessels through an American blockade, which is, again, a gigantic question mark. I don't know which one. I guess the third option, and I will say this is the possible strategic calculus. The third option, ideally, is that China pressures Iran to negotiate more. That's that's the hopeful one, I guess, is that that's their to find some common ground in negotiations. Again, I will say, listen, I'm trying to analyze this from where we are now. I don't think I have to say this in every video because I have 10 videos about it. We shouldn't be in this war. This was all free and clear before it started. I'm saying from where we are now, from what's happening now, this is an attempt to, this is not strategically that stupid, a second blockade, but this China question needs to be answered. I don't think leaving it a question mark is a good idea, because if China sails up and needs their oil because it's important to them, we need to figure that out. So we're finding out. But I have another thing I want to say, because this is all happening today, and this question will be answered with more detail this week. We're going to know more. Again, Trump and Xi are supposed to meet in less than a month in Beijing and ideally hash out some of this ever-increasing tension. I don't know if that's going to be a great negotiation, but we'll see. But until then, I have to sort of just follow with question marks and follow up. So I want to talk about something a little different. I want to talk about how the nature of warfare has changed and why this is such a unique situation in the past few hundred years of history. I mean, what's happening here with this blockade from a relatively diminished Iran is so interesting, and why the United States is being so desperate to like change the facts on the ground. Okay, so there's this guy, Eric Prince. He's the CEO of Blackwater. Not a good guy, but certainly knowledgeable on war. And he has a quote that has stuck with me. He said, this is around during the second year of the Ukraine war. Okay. This guy said, the drone is the greatest change in military strategy since Genghis Khan put stirrups on horses. Okay. And this has stuck with me because if you go back to the 1200s, when Genghis Khan figured out that you could put stirrups on horses and your archers could stand in the saddle and shoot while running backwards, there was a completely unstoppable military tactic that allowed them to cover a ton of ground and then retreat when they were attacked and just never be defeated. They were completely ahead of the game. And so this, which allowed the pace of war to go from 3 to 5 miles per hour average, because they'd have to dismount, and now the Mongol army could have 3 horses per soldier, ride one till it was empty, get on the next one, go in the battle, retreat, fight. This drastically changed war and allowed the Mongols to conquer more territory than any army ever has in the history of battle. Okay? They were almost completely undefeated. They were completely dominant. Okay? That has been the nature of the game. And now he is saying the modern version of that is the drone. The drone is changing military so much that everything else has to warp around it. And I want to talk about another thing that's happened for the past 300 years, because that is bumping up against this reality. There's this thing called the Mahan Doctrine, okay? This old fuck right here, I think his name's Alfred Mahan. He was a naval officer in America in the early 1800s. This guy came up with this really brilliant doctrine about power and the seas. He said boats equals OP. He had the brilliant Mahan Doctrine, which has ruled great powers for 300 years, is basically like you cannot be a great power on planet Earth without having a truly great navy, because a great navy allows you to control all the great choke points of trade. It allows you to control commerce, and you'll have an inherent economic advantage over anyone else. A great navy is OP. And those who have the great navies kind of get to dictate terms of trade, and everyone else has to listen. Okay? That's the idea. Ever since the British, transitioning into, the Americans, and also the Dutch and others, and then now, okay? Great navies have been the mark of the truly great powers, and they've decided. What's interesting is that has been true right up until right now, where it is starting to bump against the reality of this thing. This thing is changing the facts on the ground, because these choke points, if you wanted to stop a navy before, you would need a navy of your own. And that was very expensive. So it became a game of who has the most money. Whoever has the most money gets the biggest aircraft carriers, and they decide. But now the cost effectiveness of these drones are starting to change things. And it started in the Ukraine war. You started to see headlines like this. where first it was a little bit, and then it was a lot. And suddenly drones were the name of the game in warfare. And you could destroy things like boats at a massive, massive cost and exposure advantage. You were minimizing your exposure, you're minimizing your counterattack, and doing outsized damage, okay? Asymmetric warfare. You'd have things like a 35,000 drone, and the only way to shoot it down was with a $3.7 million missile. So cost effectively, a swarm of drones was just unbeatable. And it was slowly, and then very quickly, changing the reality of war. It was changing how money affected your ability to win combats. It was changing how geography gave you an advantage. It was changing everything. And this is gonna sound a little silly, but the more I read into this, the more it reminds me of what happened in the industry I work in, okay? It reminds me of YouTube and phones. It sounds a little crazy, I know, but legitimately, if you were to flashback 15 years ago, a little more than that, okay? And you wanted to make, I don't know, a show like this to talk to people like you would need to go through a massive intermediary. You need to buy a $6 million studio like this. You need to have TV time on a few limited slots. You would need to be, there's like a few key money-gated powers that controlled it. But the new wave of technology has disintermediated it. It has allowed smaller players outsized advantage. It's kind of changed the facts on the ground, and it has left the legacy ones feeling kind of slow and cumbersome by comparison, to where you could have a day like a few days ago where this massive set and this massive expenses is covering the same piece of news as a channel like this, I don't know who it is, and getting less views. Do you understand? Like it's a weird asymmetry because I'm just in my fucking bedroom with a basic camera. This is not possible before. If it wasn't for phones and the internet and YouTube, and it disintermediates it in a different way. And that's what's happening. I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm saying this is happening with drones. It is making it so small powers can punch way above their weight class. They don't need a massive navy to restrict trade in the way that a navy did. And it's causing all sorts of weird effects. So listen, all this is interesting, but you're probably like this woman. If you're an Atrioc viewer, you're probably like this woman in what is probably the worst clip of 2026 so far. You just want to know.
This deadline that President Trump has set, 8 p.m., has threatened to destroy a civilization. How does an investor process that? Is it a bigger upside risk or downside risk?
I love that clip because it's so stupid. Not only is it like, don't be asking that at this time, but it's also like, it's a bigger downside risk. Think about it. Think about it for 2 seconds. Like, you can answer your own question. Of course, it's a bigger downside risk, bro. And the truth is, that's the case, okay? So here's the deal. We thought there might be a reopening of trade after the first talks of this ceasefire in the Strait of Hormuz. We thought possibly, maybe it's with a toll booth, maybe not, but ships will start to get out. As this second blockade enters, it's becoming more obvious that traffic in the strait is going to be zero until this is resolved, and we don't know when it's going to be resolved. So that starts to bring some very, very uncomfortable questions. The markets have been praying to God above that this ends. Every day, it seems like they're just hoping this is done soon, but it doesn't seem to be done soon. And already we're seeing the knock-on effects, okay? Again, early estimates say that if it remains closed, let's say through the end of April, that is a minus 2.9% to global GDP. Now, that might sound like a nothing number to you. That's equivalent to COVID. That's equivalent to like 2008. Like that is a massive, massive, massive slowdown. Okay? There is a frantic, at first it's slowly, then all at once. There's a frantic race for barrels of oil from all major countries. Europe, fucking Asia, all over. People are desperate to get their hands on barrels of oil as it becomes obvious that there's going to be a scarcity of it. And you're seeing the Philippines has declared a national emergency over the prices. Bangladesh is now rationing fuel. Myanmar is having vehicles not be allowed to drive if they have an odd or an even license plate on opposite days to try and slow down consumption. We're having 4-day work weeks in many Asian countries. We're having school closures to save on fuel. This is all happening now. This is only at the very beginning. This is when people still have reserves, when some had still been trickling through. Countries are going back on coal. Countries that had tried to reduce their coal consumption, Japan, South Korea, Bangladesh, Philippines, Thailand, Pakistan, Germany, Italy, all reopening coal plants. Okay, so environmental damage. We're seeing huge knock-on effects. And I want to sum this up by saying, these costs are not all borne by the actors in the conflict. They're not borne just by, actually, Iran has been getting their oil through, not just by Iran or not just by America. I do not think America should have gotten into this war, just to be very clear. But I do want to present the opinion of the foreign minister of Singapore, who also controls a major strait. This one right here, okay? The most important in the world. Strait of Malacca is even more important than Hormuz. More trade to this. And he basically said, look, I'll let him speak.
The Straits of Malacca, the Straits of Singapore, is in fact another critical choke point. You may be aware that, in fact, if you add up all the maritime oil, crude and refined, you might be surprised that actually more flows through the Straits of Malacca and Singapore than even the Straits of Hormuz.
Okay, he controls a big strait.
If you think about global trade, container trade, there's far more flowing through this place. And the most important geographical fact, which most people are not aware of, the narrowest point in the Straits of Hormuz is 21 nautical miles. Guess what the narrowest point in the Straits of Singapore is? It's less than 2 nautical miles. So do you understand now why we have to take a categorical position that international law and UNCLOS is the constitution of the oceans, and this is a right. Freedom of navigation as a right and not a privilege for ships and planes. And this is of profound importance to Singapore. So to your specific question, yes, I have engaged with the Iranian foreign minister before the war. And yes, I'm sure I will engage him in the near future. But as a matter of principle, and not because we're taking sides, I cannot engage in negotiations for safe passage of ships or negotiate on toll rates, because to do so would be implicitly eroding this legal principle. So again, this is another example of Singapore upholding principle.
I think he makes a powerful point, and I'm generally impressed with the wisdom of Singaporean leaders. I think in the case of this war, I understand. I understand why it's being done. I understand why they're trying to do it to get leverage. But I think as this new reality of drones and geography and straits becomes real, I think we're going to see more stuff like this. I'm not a big believer in how international law can hold anyone anymore, but we're gonna miss that world. The idea where everyone can use these type of straits to pass freely and just do trade was beneficial for almost all countries involved. And if we get to a world where everybody's using their geography and the fact that they can have an outsized advantage with drones to try and cut off trade or charge a toll or a fee at every stage, is going to be catastrophic. The long-term damage, especially for poorer countries caught in the middle, is going to be serious. I'm hopeful that we can find a world where that doesn't happen, but certainly we haven't done a good job getting there. Thanks for watching. That's the update. We'll have more to say as we get further along in this. I do not know how this double blockade will go. We'll definitely have a follow-up video on this as we know more. Thanks for watching.